I want to welcome everyone to our webinar for today. It's 5 key benefits to multi-country payroll outsourcing for SAP SuccessFactors. Before we get started, I usually like to give a little background on the topic and the session that we're presenting and why we're doing it. And when it comes to this particular topic, it's kind of following along the path of cloud adoption in HCM space. If you think back 5 years or so when SAP first bought SuccessFactors, kind of the evolution for a lot of companies has been to put their toe in the water and try a module and try a hybrid approach and kind of work their way into it. And what we're seeing now after the 5.5 years is more companies looking at going to a core HCM in the cloud with Employee Central. And what that does is it brings up the inevitable question of what do we do with payroll? Because many companies have invested in on-premise payroll, or they have set relationships with third-party payroll providers, and they need to worry about integration if we go to EC, and how does that all work? So it's really become a more current topic, and a lot of customers that approach us at both Celergo and iXerv talk about that. So Celergo and iXerv got together and came up with an offering that integrates data and processes into Employee Central through a multi-country payroll outsourcing, or as we call it, MCPO approach. And that's what this session is about, to explain the process, define what MCPO is and what it means to customers, and really kind of give you some details around the offering and share that with you. So that's kind of the background of why we're here today. So I appreciate the opportunity and appreciate everyone joining us today. So we're going to start off with just a couple of logistics before I do some introductions and get into the agenda. You are all on mute right now. That's normal. That's fine. We're just going to handle questions through the control panel on the right side of your screen. So when we get to the Q&A section at the end, you'll be able to type in any questions that you have. We'll read those questions that are in the queue, and we'll go that route. And also, this meeting is being recorded. You'll get a link to the recording after the session's over. So if you want to share that with any colleagues who couldn't make it, that will be available. And finally, in that GoToWebinar control panel on the right side of your screen, there is a copy of this presentation. It's in PDF form, so if you go into the handouts section in there, you can download that there. From an agenda perspective, again, I will do the introductions real quickly in a moment, then I will turn it over to our speakers. We'll go through the payroll options that are available today for SuccessFactors customers, and then we'll specifically spend the rest of the time talking about MCPO and then the iXerv Celergo offering for MCPO. So we'll go through all of that, and we'll do a wrap-up and handle questions at the end. So from an introduction perspective, our speakers for today, Michelle Hanna-Michael is the founder, executive chairman, and chief strategy officer of Celergo, and her responsibilities there include determining corporate strategic direction and the product development of the company. Before Celergo, Michelle was CEO of an international relocation technology company, and before that worked for Ford Motor Company and International Expatriate Services and International Audit. She's a frequent writer and speaker for the American Payroll Association, for relocation associations, and for entrepreneurial communities. Jerome Whelans is co-founder and COO of iXerv Americas. He's got more than 20 years of global payroll, SAP HCM, and SAP SuccessFactors experience. He's implemented payroll across multiple platforms in more than 80 countries, and he most recently successfully led one of the largest Employee Central payroll implementations in the world. He's a frequent speaker at payroll and HCM conferences, including last month's Sapphire ASUG annual conference in Orlando. And his expertise ranges from managing multinational implementations to running global support across multiple regions. So those are our two speakers for today. We want to welcome them and thank them for their time, and I'm going to right away turn it over to Jerome to start off this presentation. Jerome?
Hello, welcome everybody. So this is Jerome. What I want to talk about before we actually go into this, and actually AJ started it pretty well here, kind of defining what we're looking at today is really where does payroll fit in this mix of trying to implement SuccessFactors, digitalization, core HR implementation. So a lot of companies like to move or are looking at to move to Employee Central, but in the end they see payroll often as the barrier not going there, or don't know exactly what to do with that. So why do then basically see payroll as a barrier? So I think most commonly it's cost, right? Some customers, move to the payroll cloud. They see this cost. They don't really know the cost sometimes, or they, don't have an appetite for investing in payroll while they're also trying to invest in their core HR and some of the talent management pieces. Status quo is another one. A lot of customers sit on the current platform, have implemented over the years multiple payroll platforms, are happy where they're at, and they feel that it's not broken today. Why fix it? I mean, it's difficult to sometimes make the business case for that. And then the last one is sometimes geography and size. So a lot of companies, multiple countries. They try to go global, but then find out sooner than later that they have so many countries. It's very difficult to find a good strategy, to find a good global payroll strategy, as well as a vendor that maybe can take care of all of it. So if you look at really the options that we see for the customers today, there's basically three options. First of all is Employee Central Payroll. The strong payroll engine from SAP that we know includes all the bells and whistles that were there before. But non cloud-based and very tightly integrated with SuccessFactors EC. The second thing that we have out there, of course, is our friends from Celergo here, a third-party outsourced payroll we call Multi-Country Payroll Outsourcing. We specifically have defined a integration for that, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then the last one, of course, if you already have an on-premise payroll, there are ways to integrate this on a fairly standard way. So what is then multi-country payroll outsourcing, MCPO? How we define it is the following way. It's a third-party payroll solution, so Celergo, and we basically connect the third-party payroll solution through a connector that we've certified with SAP, which is basically using the SAP Cloud integration. With that integration, we only have to define one interface, and with it in one interface, we can service 150 countries that Celergo basically offers. We can do end-to-end payroll processing, and we can support that globally. Additionally, a lot of partners out there, they offer payroll consulting services, and they say, I can do what this country or that country, or we're maybe based in 5 countries, we can help you there, but the other 25, we don't really know what to do. That's not an issue we have, because iXerv and Celergo, we can basically offer over 150 countries, either on ECP or MCPO. Now, MCPO for Employee Central specifically then, normally we focus on sub 1,000 employee countries, so less than 1,000 people in your payroll, and we integrate that with SAP SuccessFactors. A lot of times what you see, a lot of clients are afraid to go into that integration because they see it as costly. If you have 20 people in the Netherlands and 30 people in Germany, integrating that and writing individual interfaces can be a very costly business. So that's where we wrote one standard interface that we can use for all payroll at once. We use basically the SAP Cloud Platform and SAP Certified Extension, and you can also find us on the basically SAP App Store. The last thing that we basically send over personal information, job details, address details, bank details, and very country-specific data requirements. This is all basically supported by the integration that we built. The nice thing about MCPO versus Employee Central Payroll, those are the two main things here, is that you can actually work in combination with them. So if you choose, and we're going to go into a little more depth here later, but if you choose to do Employee Central Payroll for a couple of countries and the rest of the countries is a better fit for multi-country payroll outsourcing, we can kind of work that together and make it one overall offering. Let's go to the 5 key benefits of multi-country payroll outsourcing.
Great. So global payroll coverage is really important when you're looking at an MCPO. And the benefit that you get out of an MCPO is you get coverage not only for your smaller locations, but for locations also that may not be covered by ECP today. So when you also are looking at an MCPO, what they'll offer typically is a full range of services. Everything from you'll get technology, you'll get data aggregation, you'll get reporting and connectivity. So at Celergo, we are a global provider that we provide coverage today in over 150 countries. We've been processing payroll in over 100 countries for the last 12 years. So we have very deep domain expertise in all of these locations. We actually support our clients today through 4 service delivery centers in Chicago, Bogota, Budapest, and Singapore. And we've strategically picked these locations because they support our clients in region and by language. So that's very important to us because we aren't a call center. Clients who call us, they have a person or a team that's dedicated to their account, and they can work through either email, through the technology, or through just picking up the phone. We also speak 46 unique languages on staff. That's incredibly important because most of our clients do not speak that many languages, and they need us to help, review forms, whether that's tax forms or compliance, or deal with local authorities on their behalf. So we have that capability in-house. And and the data and everything that comes from EC actually comes to us in one pipe for all the locations that we support. So as you can see, when you tie ECP and MCPO together, though that sounds a little bit like alphabet soup, what it gives you is extensive coverage for global payroll, as you can see by this graphic. So we cover predominantly most of the countries that have larger payroll locations or are the most popular. So you can see there's a little bit of gray there in the center where we just don't have as much requests for payroll. If you look at the list of countries covered, you can see that Celergo covers the full set, with ECP covering 41 locations as indicated by the purple squares. Now, as you look at this, for example, Argentina, and you have over 1,000 people in Argentina, you may say it makes a whole bunch of sense for us to do ECP in that location. If you only have 20 people in Argentina, you certainly can use Celergo as an MCPO to provide the full range of services, as you may not have deep expertise in that particular location. So this is a great way to look at all the different locations that can be supported by this combined offering. Now, if you look specifically at Latin America, you can see that predominantly all the countries are being covered either through ECP or through Celergo, except for just a few islands out there. Now, a lot of companies have larger payrolls or extensive payroll coverage in Europe. So the nice thing here is, again, you can see by this graphic, it is very, very well covered by both ECP and by Celergo through an MCPO offering. And you can see by looking at these countries that either you can do a very large population or a small population, and whatever, depending upon what your needs are and the flexibility, and you may need, more of a technology-based approach, or you may want more of a fully managed approach. And you can see that the coverage is pretty extensive in this region. So what exactly does that mean when you talk about a managed service approach and one single global payroll vendor? Well, one global payroll vendor like Celergo, we would provide you one contract globally, and we call it one point of contact, but basically what we're saying is that you have a one person or one company that you go to for all of your payroll needs. We would obviously support that based upon your needs by region and by team. So if you have a lot of payrolls in one particular region, we may have a whole team that's dedicated to your account. Also, when we talk about what exactly do we do for our clients, we manage the full suite. So that's data management coming in. So all the changes that you put through EC comes to us as one pipe. We then take that and we actually look at it. So if you have someone who makes 20,000 euros a year and you give them a €1 million bonus, we might actually contact you and say, are you absolutely sure that's what you want to have happen? So we do a first pass. Then we do the calculations, which is gross to net, as we all know it, or if there's an expat, we'll do net to gross, including all the complexity around shadow payrolls. Once the calculations are performed, we actually audit them. So we take a look at it and say, does it make sense? Does the net pays are higher this month than last month? That makes sense because we had a lot of bonuses that came in this month. But we're also looking for calculations on whether people have maxed out in particular taxes, and we do all of that. So by the time the client actually sees the pay register, which is consistent country to country, so the look and the feel and the payroll elements are consistent, it's very easy for a client to approve a pay register and move the process forward. which of course the next step is funding. So we move close to $1 billion a year for our clients, and that means that we actually make payments to the employees themselves, to the government agencies and authorities and social programs, and of course down into third parties if there's a third-party pension provider, as an example. Finally, we do the compliance filings, which it can be as simple as pressing a button because it's automated, or as complex as putting someone on a train for 8 hours to go out to a far-flung region where they have to physically present a paper and get it stamped. But we assume all liability for the compliance components and making sure that it's on time and it is accurate for our clients. And we provide that service, which in turn, once we get the final document back that's been stamped, push it back through to the client so that they have it archived for their own information, but it also proves that the compliance was filed on time at the right location. And then finally is reporting. We've got a whole suite of reporting, global reporting, that gives you information down to the transaction detail, also gives you pay registers, whether that's year to date, that's current, by quarter, however you need that information. And we also feed not only the GL, so the accounting systems, but we will feed that data back to EC.
If we then look at the next key component here is the simplified implementation timeline. If you're familiar with the ECP or the on-premise payroll implementations from the past, a lot of times what you see is that these implementations can take quite a long time, especially if a lot of countries. Mostly it has to do with the readiness of the organization, how much you can put in the system at once, how many projects you can run at the same time, and the strategy around your whole program management. In general, an ECP implementation takes 6 to 9 months, depending a little bit on the country, complexity, etc. What you end up with, as you see down here, is basically the typical sequential implementation timeline that you end up with. Okay. Now, if you look at a MCPO implementation, you see that it changes a little bit. I can cover a lot more countries quite quickly because the MCPO implementation itself take a shorter time. In general, you can do those in 3 months. So, and we can also do multiples at once because they're not all dependent on the actual ECP system. They have individual systems. You can do multiple streams at once and implement those. And we basically only have to work on the connector at the same time in SuccessFactors, while also at the same time we can still do an employee central implementation. So overall, what you see, you can make a lot of headway quite quickly and reduce your overall implementation timeline and the disruption of the business. If you then look at, and I'm talking here sub-zero or sub-1,000 employees, if you look at total cost of ownership per employee per year, that MCPO can actually be a pretty good deal. If you look at the per pay or the per employee, you see that in general there's significant less cost if you run this way. And also in the end, there's also a saving on the amount of employees you need to use in the end. So especially when you have smaller countries and you have to run a lot of on-premise, it becomes very difficult. Or with MCPO, you can probably have a higher ratio of personnel versus employees.
So if you take an example of a company who has spread across multiple countries with populations, maybe large populations like the US with 5,000 and smaller populations like China of 300 employees, and they're looking at having the visibility and the control and the integration with EC to cover all of these locations, they may decide to shuffle their payrolls to look like the following, where they'll say, okay, let's look at our larger populations to put on ECP, which would be the US, Canada, Colombia, France, because they're all larger than 1,000 employees. So that makes a lot of sense from a cost-benefit analysis and potentially from a complexity of managing those particular payrolls. For the other payrolls that are sub 1,000 and in locations that are maybe a little bit more far-flung or locations where the company doesn't have a lot of expertise and can be complex, like a Brazil or a Russia, these are great countries to outsource to a MCPO provider like Celergo. So in that case, all these locations can be handled with a fully managed service where there's language support, there's in-region support, there's integration with ECP, And the overall payroll program then can be managed and controlled through Employee Central down into Employee Central Payroll for the larger locations and into Celergo for the smaller locations.
Now, what does this now look like? Because, of course, we talked about the integration with Employee Central, but what does that really mean? So if we then start here on the main screen of SuccessFactors, you see that for the payroll manager itself, there's a dashboard that's now part of his overall view and all the pieces that he's looking at, and it can be every morning, every day, whatever he does. On the dashboard itself, you see that there's color indication, you can see the countries that you have, and you kind of can see where they are in the process. And then when it actually goes to the Portlet, the payroll manager can click on the Portlet, and then the next slide will show you what he then sees. He then can see by country, what does my payroll calendar look like? Where am I in the process of payroll? Have I missed dates or not? What is it, the current date today, etc. Okay, and this kind of looks a little similar to ECP. But the other piece that I like very much about the integration itself is that the MCPO integration is very similar to ECP from the aspect that employees still can go to Employee Central and pick up their pay slips. So it doesn't matter if they sit in the US with the 5,000 people we saw before, where they can see the PDF online through ECP, or they sit in China with the 300 people, they still can see their payslip through PDF in EC. So your whole ESS scenario kind of is across the board still the same. You don't have to do a whole lot of things to basically make that work, which is normally a big problem if you start integrating a lot of different payroll systems to have back and forth integration. This is on the actual payslip. Now, of course, that depends on the country, but it's a good example to see. And the employee can basically print this off at his own liking and whenever he wants to. If we look at the overall process flow, how does this really work in the end? You see on the left side that the customer, they input the data in the different countries. They can either input the data in SAP SuccessFactors, and you see then we can basically then send over through the interface and the integration that we have, demographic file, bank details, country-specific data, payments and deductions. That will go to the Celergo Global Connect, and from the Celergo Global Connect, basically the different payroll systems will be fed. There are pieces of information that don't fit in SuccessFactors today or anything else that basically go over the separate data feed, can still go directly to Celergo, so still one vendor in the end, and basically they will feed the payroll systems from there. What also is a possibility is the payroll results back. So we just looked at that, basically where we have the pay slips coming back to SuccessFactors, and employees can look at those. And we also have, of course, a general ledger. If you have a global finance system, or you have one global template that you use, Celergo can definitely also fulfill those needs. So if we do a short summary, I mean, we basically, what we've touched on today is basically MCPO for iXerv payroll solutions. And it's really an end-to-end payroll solution, as you saw. So we offer global, it's end-to-end payroll processing solution for more than 150 countries. And it includes all the pieces that Michelle touched on earlier: data management, calculation, the audits, the funding and foreign exchange, compliance filings, and reporting. So in the end, we feel with MCPO in the mix, there's really a good cause or a good lead into basically replacing your full landscape with an integrated payroll solution. And I think that's key. A lot of companies struggle with this, basically getting a good strategy globally, getting payroll in the mix and integrated into their core HR system. But I feel that these solutions that we have here, the on-premise payroll, Employee Central Payroll, and the multi-country payroll outsourcing for what's left, you have a very good offering where you can actually make a global, a very integrated system, and actually a very good data quality in the end.
Okay, thanks, Jerome, and thanks, Michelle. We've reached the question portion of the presentation. As I mentioned in the open, if you have a question, you may type it into the questions box in the right side of your screen that go to Webinar Control Panel, and we'll read them. There are some in the queue already, so we're going to dive right in. And while I get those ready here, I'm going to pull up the connection, the slide with the contact information, excuse me. First question here, and based on this, I'm going to assume this one goes to Jerome, but can you use the integration to EC that you described and use ECP at the same time?
Absolutely, that's kind of the power of this whole integration. You can work them side by side and still have the kind of same look and feel for the end user. So even if a payroll manager had multiple countries to work with, I think he can definitely navigate through both. And when the implementation is done, you can actually see at the end the payroll results in both as well.
Okay, next question. Can you explain the single interface? I think they're referring to the one interface for the MCPOs. I'm not sure who wants to handle that.
I can talk through that, that's fine.
Okay.
So the interface basically developed on SAP Cloud Integration. It was certified by SAP. We built it in such a way that it's extendable. We can pick up country specifics, and when the compliance changes, etc., we are basically flexible enough to make changes on the EC side as well to basically pick up that data. I hope that answers the questions.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Michelle. Sure.
The brilliance of having one pipe or one integration for all countries is that every time you bring on another country, you aren't also having to bring on a new integration. So it reduces the amount of time that you have to standing up a new payroll, and also makes it much easier as we do upgrades and improvements on that integration. It's just one. It's not across like 20 countries or 20 payrolls.
Okay, and I just had a follow-up from that same person. They said, thanks, we had multiple integrations today, so that's exactly what I was asking, so that's perfect.
Okay.
Next question in the queue. How do you ensure compliance globally? The slide said guaranteed.
Sure, absolutely. So compliance is handled, there's two levels of compliance, obviously. There's global compliance, which we ensure, we work with our clients to ensure that they're compliant with things like global data privacy, whether that's Russian data privacy or that's European data privacy, and keep them aware. That could be FCPA, UK anti-bribery. There's all kinds of new ones that come out all the time. At the local level, we also work with our clients, and we work with in-country experts to ensure that when we set up the calculations, they are set up properly under the right compliance in each jurisdiction, and continually update that as new, rules, taxes, those kinds of things come out. And so we have that in-country expertise. And then in turn, we also have the in-country expertise to file those documents and make sure that that information is passed back to the client, so they always have it for their own compliance program.
Okay. So next question here, it says, how do you determine the implementation order for multiple countries? Is there flexibility in that? Jerome, I think that's maybe more in your court.
There's absolutely flexibility in that. It depends on the organization. It depends on the burning platforms. It depends on contract negotiation. There's a lot of things that come together. And I think once the client has selected this overall program, at that point it's normal to put a roadmap together on how we can get there, and what is the first things that we need to do, and how do we get through the whole program overall.
Okay. I've got another question here. It says, you mentioned through MCPO you handle funding. Can you provide an example on how you do this?
Sure, there's multiple ways to move money around the globe. So some companies prefer that we just create a bank file, and they actually load the bank file in country and release the funds. Others prefer to send one tranche of funds to us. So we'll say, hey, look, to cover your payroll in these 5 countries, I need $600,000. And they'll move the money to us, we impound it, and then we'll convert it to the various currencies, and then make the payments actually into the employees and into the government agencies on their behalf. So it depends upon what the clients need, and it may vary from country to country. So some countries we may be impounding the money and moving the money directly, and in other countries, either because of local requirements for compliance or preference by the client, we might be doing bank files.
Okay, I've got one more in the queue here. They said, okay, I came in late. Can you explain the technology behind the integration? I think, Jerome, you covered that, but if you want to repeat that, that'll be great.
Okay. So it used to be the HANA Cloud Platform Integration, and now it's called SAP Cloud Platform Integration that we use for the integration itself. And then we also have on the EC side, we have some parts that we do there as well. But in the end, it was certified by SAP. As I said before, it is on the SAP App Store as well, so you can look at it there.
Okay, I think that's the end of my question queue. If anyone on the call thinks of any questions after the fact, please don't hesitate to contact us. And I know that both from, I'll put some words in both Jerome and Michelle's mouth, but the easiest way to get a handle on this for customers thinking of going this route is to schedule a meeting and kind of have that roadmap discussion that Jerome was talking about and figure out what your landscape looks like and what the best way to do this is, and kind of get some real world advice on where to go with ECP, for example, and where the MCPO approach would make sense, and just how that integration would work. So we encourage that kind of discussion is really the next step for a lot of customers. So don't be afraid to ask for that, contact us, and we're happy to talk to you about it some more. I want to thank Michelle and Jerome for their time today, and thank everyone for taking time out of your busy days. We hope you'll join us for a future webinar, and we hope that we get some feedback from you if you have an interest in this or you have comments on it. And that will conclude our session for today. Thank you, everyone.